request to
A lot of it is going to be real quick, just quick reports.
Okay. All right, we'll go ahead and call the Amherst County Service Authority Board meeting to order. Let the record reflect it's March 2nd, 2021, and the time is 1:31. We'll go ahead and go to citizen comments. See no citizens in the audience today, so we'll go ahead and I'll ask for approval of the agenda. So motion on the floor by Mr. Martin. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next, we have the approval of the minutes for the last month's board meeting. We need an approval of the minutes or any changes, if any were noted.
Mr. Chairman, so moved for approval.
Motion on the floor by Mr. Carroll. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, Mr. Hopkins, we'll let you go ahead and lead us into the monthly financial report.
And before we get into that, Mr. Moore, did you vote on the motion? I didn't hear you.
For the minutes?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Didn't hear you. Just want to make sure that. Okay, well, this should go pretty quick, it being only the 1 month into it, but I mean, we came out, this is of course for January, and we started the year roaring like a lion. I'm hoping that financially we have the stamina to keep this up. But we really started out well in water. Compared to last year, almost $25,000, better than 10.5% compared to last year. Total revenues, almost $124,000 ahead of last year. That's almost 49%. And of course, that includes another VDOT reimbursement, so we'll talk about that in a little bit. The next line under connections, I did want to make a correction that it reads in the staff report, it reads negative $4,500. Actually, it said it should be a plus $4,500. So We had one connection in January. Wastewater, first line under revenues, I had a similar correction that negative 760129 should be a positive. But, so we're almost 11% ahead in wastewater compared to last year, and that's almost unheard of for us to be ahead in wastewater. And total revenues were over 9% ahead compared to 2020. Combined water and wastewater together, sales were better than 32.5%, or $32,500 better than 10.6% ahead of 2020, and revenues were $131,400 ahead. That's about 40%, but again, that includes that VDOT reimbursement. But even if you take that out, that 131,000 goes down to better than 36,500 and better than almost 11.15%. So we started off the year, like I said, like a lion. So I'm hoping we've got the legs to keep it going. Questions?
Seeing no questions, thank you, Mr. Hopkins. That certainly bodes well. Hopefully, we can have some readjustments in our rates going forward. You know, maybe next year. I know that we had built in 5%, 6%, 7% rate increases, and one of the things I've noticed is the water bills are more expensive. I mean, I pay them every month, so I've noticed that they definitely are. But it's good we're going in the right direction. Hopefully, I see a lot of people at the car washes today too, so you'll follow the song on the road, maybe you'll get another bump as well.
Well, this is the first year we've had a relatively, rate increases coming into this year that were more in line with what we would like to do. 5 or 6% instead of the 7, 8, almost 9% that we've been doing for the last several years because of these big capital projects we've got coming up.
Good. Well, thank you, Mr. Hopkins. We'll go ahead and go on to old business.
Okay. You've got the staff report there. First item is the James River Bank Stabilization. Board members Woods and Perot joined me and Mr. Hall and the EDA director and assistant director on February 17th for their orientation tours, and as part of that tour, we went down and took a look at this project. I'm still working with Hurt Profit to get the nationwide permits so we can get the, hopefully get our crew started to do some of these temporary repairs and at least arrest the erosion. And I'm still waiting for the results of the case construction grant that will help us with that. Hurt Profit completed their topographic survey and base sheet, and I'll be working with them starting tomorrow on a design for that 500 or 600 feet of area that we really need to address right away. The water and sewer, any questions on that? Mr. Woods, Mr. Perot, any thoughts about coming from the tour?
Just appreciate your time and thank you for going around. It was also very good to work with or to get to know the economic development folks. And I think seeing the key parts of the infrastructure were very helpful. Thank you for that.
The infrastructure projects jump down to Woods Lake Road, which is complete, but we still haven't gotten the final contractor payment request. I was expecting that in January, then I was expecting that in February, so I don't know what the holdup is, but I will get with Hurt Profit on that. Got what I think is cautiously optimistic great news on the VC Mobile Home Park. What I'm hearing, and I think Mr. Perot can back me up on this because he's been following it too, it looks like the $100,000 that we requested from the state in a budget amendment is actually going to be $250,000. It's gone through the final General Assembly vote and been sent to, or is going to be sent to the governor for signatures, or his signature. And so that could actually allow us to expand the project down to the training center. Originally all we wanted to do was extend the water main down Colony Road to the training center. But conceivably now we can actually replace some of the lines that we were initially going to use when we finish this project, going to Lower Rapid End and down to the mobile home park, and also connect to the city's water supply main, which will initiate a potential interconnection project like we've been talking about for the last couple of years. And so I'm still planning on doing that with our crew, which should allow us to really stretch that money out and get a lot more work done. Grand Creek River Grand Creek Reservoir Dam Improvements Project. Hurd and Profit has completed the site visit survey and they're starting on the design. I have sent copies of the topo base sheet to the 4 property owners that own the property across Grand Creek from where the emergency spillway will discharge into the creek. If that spillway is ever used for any substantial flows, it's going to just tear up that other bank pretty substantially. And I want to talk to them about the possibility of armoring that, either through getting an easement from them, or maybe if they want to sell that frontage. But after I expect to have a conference call meeting with them on a weekend sometime soon, and then I'll report back to the board as to where that went. The Westdale Court Sanitary Sewer Extension. The county attorney completed a draft agreement with the developer, and Mr. Martin, you had been asking that for the last couple of months. And I did my edits, which I sent back to Mr. Lockerbie. He's okayed them, and so that draft agreement has been sent to the developer, and he's reviewing that right now. I expect to hear back from him in another week or 2. But before that April meeting, I'm hoping to bring this to the April meeting for authorization from the board to execute. The EDA business friendliness, nothing has really happened on the various priorities. I was going to come in and we talked about some of the county code changes that I was going to propose with Mr. Lockerbie. And I was going to make a presentation at this meeting about that stuff, but while I was working on that, the county attorney and the finance director were kind enough to let me know that the supervisor's annual subsidy for sanitary sewer extension was on the bubble for possibly being canceled for this year. And so I wanted to, I jumped off that county code changes presentation and prepared one for the budget workshop that I ended up not having to make, but we'll be talking about that in a little bit. But I do have something on business friendliness, and if I can get. I didn't want to put all these things in. There'd be too many attachments to put these things into the board meeting agenda. I thought I'd just bring in hard copies. But when I first got here, of course, I worked with Hurd and Profit for 10 years, from 2002 to 2012, and the Service Authority and Amherst County were my main clients at that time. So I was long aware of all the issues. Dan French used to talk about them all the time, about the issues between the development community and the Service Authority. And when I came on, that was one of the first things I immediately wanted to address. And I figured it was about time I came back with some kind of report as to where we're going on this. So what you got there are testimonials, some of them multiple, from over a dozen developers, owners, Service Authority customers, even county staff, that about the improvements that we're seeing with the Service Authority in relation to the local development community and their projects. So I just wanted to bring that to your attention because I think it's real good news, and you all need to be aware of that. And the last thing on old business was just I wanted to let you all know that we got our second shots for the COVID-19 vaccination, everybody in the water office. So we are all fully vaccinated as of February 19th. So any questions, comments?
No, yeah, Mr. Hopkins, I appreciate you bringing that to us. All these different letters from different community members and developers talking about how you've been helpful to them certainly goes a long way in creating the right perception for businesses and people looking to do business here. So I do appreciate that. That was one of the things in the past that people often harped upon, is not your predecessor, your previous Mr. French, sometimes got a, I would just say that he wasn't well received by some, and that was something that we were looking to improve, and from what I see here is certainly on our way. So I appreciate your time and your effort. I know you do put a lot of time into this, and we appreciate it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. We are getting there little by little, and it's something I ought to point out. At least one, and I think maybe 2 or more of the letters actually mention, compare us kind of a little bit with Campbell County, and that's something you all want to, you might want to pay attention to noting because we come out favorably in those comparisons. So we talk all the time about how we compare to Campbell and Bedford. So that's something you all might want to take a look at.
All right, anything else? All right, we'll hit on, I believe we're going to hit on to new business, Mr. Hopkins.
Okay. First item is another reappropriation, and this is not I'm not asking for money. I actually want to take money back out of the budget and put it back into reserves. What happened, this was a mistake on my part, I screwed up. When I got the draft, the budget for this year done, the draft of it done, and was preparing, I had already sent it to you all for review, had it ready to go into the December 1st board meeting agenda, and I thought I would go ahead and get a jump on the reappropriations that I was looking at for January. And so I was working on that. I had actually taken a copy of the draft agenda and was working in that document and put that information in there to include these reappropriations. And then in fast order, the money from the state, that application and that administration came in for the customer assistance. And then the FEMA grant came in, and then the case construction grant came in. It just, they all came in about the same time. They all had to be done right away. And I apologize, but I never went back to the budget and pulled that back out. So it actually got approved with the reappropriations in it. And then when I came in January to get the reappropriations done, those things were actually reappropriated twice. So I want to take $240,000 out of the budget, and they're enumerated on the reappropriation form you have. I ran this by the county finance director. She agreed this is the way to do it, and this would work out fine. So I'm asking for this reappropriation.
All right, are there any questions for Mr. Hopkins? If not, we have a recommendation.
Can I ask you a quick question? So these all come from basically a capital account. These are not operational funds, but these are all capital acquisitions.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
Okay, so no effect on the operating budget as we go forward. Just want to say that for clarification. I'll make a motion if you're ready. Mr. Buren, I don't have it from me. I just moved to adopt the reappropriation as presented.
A motion on the floor, Mr. Farrell. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you very much. Next item is some good news, some real good news. I got a phone call from Davenport and Company. R.T. Taylor from Davenport is here to talk to us about this. This came up a couple weeks ago, or actually maybe about a month ago, when we started working on a refinancing of our remaining 2017 bond and loan, and that came out of VRA, Virginia Resources Authority's spring 2021 pool schedule, and they're publishing of that. And so we started working on that, and we were actually going to come in here. We were planning on presenting a resolution to refinance that money. And while, and our team will talk about this, but while they were talking with BB&T, who currently owns the loan, or has the loan, BB&T came back and said, well, we would much rather you just refinance with us, and we will drop your finance percentage rate down to 2.01%, and we will waive the prepayment penalty, which would not be waived if we went back to VRA. So we're looking at an opportunity here to save about $25,000 a year for the next 17 years. And with that, I'll turn it over to our team.
Good afternoon. Thank you all for having me here today. As Bob was laying out for you, we periodically, as you well know, we periodically review the authority and the county's debt profile, being a financial advisor. And so when we were doing some work early on in the calendar year, we came across and looked at potential refunding candidates for the authority and came across the 2017 BB&T loan. BB&T now is, of course, Truist. During our work and coordinating with Bob and your bond counsel, Stans Anderson, the deadline for the VRA spring pool was February 5th. So in coordination with Bob and with your bond counsel, we took the lead in getting the materials together, which it was not a heavy lift, because you may recall we did a new money financing and a refunding in the fall. So VRA had already sort of done the heavy lifting for the credit work. We had to provide them some supplemental materials since that time frame. So we were able to get that together pretty quickly, get it submitted for February 5th. And again, when you submit that application to VRA, you're not committing the authority to going forward with the spring pool. We just did that as a matter of holding our place in line. And so during that process, we were also in coordination and communicating with BB&T. I'm stuck on BB&T, so y'all will just stick with that right now. That's who y'all originally did the loan with back in 2017. We reached out to them to clarify what their prepayment provisions would be. And as we've done many times, we've asked the banks when we get back and we know we're going to pay off a bank loan, if you'd like to keep this, can you drop your rate? And that's when we gauge whether or not they're interested. And BB&T tends to like to keep the loans, we know, and they've modified, and we've worked on several of these modifications previously. Your old rate in 2017 was 2.89%. And they originally came back and said, well, we'll keep it, we'd like to drop it down to 2.12. Well, at the time, the public bond markets that you can access through a VRA spring pool, it was not as favorable. So we asked to push back a little bit and asked them to drop it down further, and that's when they got to the 2.01. And so currently, BB&T is a firm proposal at 2.01%. You would not be changing any of the terms of the loan. Everything sort of stays status quo. You're going to still have the flexible prepayment provisions, the same security language. There's no county support on that particular loan. So it's all it's the same loan effectively. We're just going to drop the rate and re-amortize. Okay, so that's where we get the $25,000 roughly per year in savings, which equates to, and I'll just flip to page 2 on this memo. If you look about middle of the page to the preliminary results, we're looking at total cash flow savings of about $405,000. We're not shifting out the final maturity. That's still going to be November 1 of 2037. And we're looking at a present value basis savings of 5.9%. So almost 6%, almost twice the industry benchmark of 3%. And we don't have a formal resolution or documents for you to approve today. We're going to come back to you in April at your April 6th meeting. What we would like from you today is, if this sounds like something y'all would want to do, go back to BB&T, say drop our rate. We'll work with bond counsel, Bob, and BB&T over the balance of March to get the numbers finalized, to get the documents drafted up, and get your resolution for approval set up for the April 6th meeting. And I think we would just, Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, we would just need sort of a motion so that we could go back to the bank and sort of solidify, yes, the authority board wants to move forward, so we can kick that into gear. Is that fair?
Yes, that's right.
Okay. So no formal action on the resolution, but if we could get it sort of documented by way of motion, to give us that direction, if that's what your preference would be.
All right, well, you've heard it from the horse's mouth. Is there any discussions or questions, board?
Two quick questions. Sorry, I'm always asking questions. Looking at the VRA statement, so the interest rate is at 1.5, where BB&T is 2.01. So the difference, obviously there will have been more savings in a lower interest rate, but the real difference is in the prepayment penalty.
That's part of it. And so there's also a way of, there's a footnote here because it's only tied into the VRA financing at this point based on how the rates flush out right now. But there's an escrow fund that's tied to the 2017 bond that was for refundings in 2012. So the actual call date on the 2012s is in November of 2022. So that escrow fund is currently yielding 1.9% in interest earnings. It has to follow the new refunding. So it's called transferred proceeds. It's a muni code through the federal code for IRS. And what it says is, if these funds are transfer proceeds, then we have to yield restrict them. So they can't earn the 1.9 that they're designed to do to take out the old debt. Okay? They would have to be hemmed in at, if VRA was at 1.14% on the RV yield, then that escrow fund would have to be limited to 1.14%, and the authority would have to rebate, pay a yield reduction payment to the IRS. So that gets quantified. And back when we ran that a couple of weeks ago, before rates really changed, that was about 60 grand. So that's over and above. It's another penalty, if you will, that eats into that VRA refinancing scenario. Additionally, in the past couple of weeks, we've seen the muni tax exempt rates pop up 30 basis points. So that's, again, really, if you look in the middle of the page on page 2, we've updated as of the market as of Friday, or yes, Friday's NMD. And a VRA current market scenario is yielding roughly 215,000 in total, versus the 405 that we have firm in hand bid from BB&T. So that's
getting worse, but BB&T is staying constant.
That's right.
Mr. Broke, I said something, correct me if I'm wrong, but what I understood from our discussions was that the BB&T rate is also locked, whereas the VRA rate won't get locked for another 2.5 months.
70 days, yeah.
I thought it was May 12th.
May 12th,
Yeah,
I think.
so-
That's right, May 12th, roughly 70 days.
Okay.
So I was getting ready to ask about that too. So that would be your lock-in rate. Rates are
That's
actually
right.
going up. Well, yes.
And it's a matter of wording. I know I was saying held firm. BB&T's rate, we know it right now because their firm proposal is good through April 20th closing.
Gotcha. All right. Well, I certainly appreciate it. And what you just explained about the escrow account and all that, I've never heard about that before, and just affirms the good work that that board does in the county. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, appreciate it. Bob, I also had that same question. When you look there, it says floating till 512 and it's 1.5%. You said it's raised by 3 basis points. So
30.
30, excuse me.
0.3%.
Yeah, so it's like 0.18 now, or?
That's roughly 0.75, I think. 1.75.
Okay, so it's floating till then. And so the floating interest rates kind of scare me a little bit.
Right, and as Bob pointed out, we've got another 2 months to go before VRA prices its bonds on or about May 12th. That's their tentative bond sale.
All right, so tentatively, I'm fine with this. The rest of you feel the same way? Looks like we have an agreement here, so the next board meeting, you'll bring the information back to us and you'll do your work. So with BB&T and.
That's right, and I apologize, it's Truist now, but
I said the
you're gonna
same
see if they still submit stuff on BB&T letterhead, so that's an attachment in here if you want to look at the proposal.
I think you need a motion, correct?
Yes, sir, Mr. Martin, thank you.
I make a motion that the Hcsa State Board authorize the Hcsa Executive Director to proceed with a refinancing of Amherst County Service Authority's 2017 bond/loan for the purpose of debt service savings by refinancing the existing bond loans with BB&T Truist.
All right, we have a motion on the floor by Mr. Martin. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Y'all have a good day.
You too.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.
All right, now we have a sanitary sewer extensions, Mr. Hopkins.
I alluded to this a few minutes ago, that I wanted to make I prepared a presentation for the February 25th Board of Supervisors workshop. It ended up not having to be made at that time, but I thought it was, I've been wanting to find some time to make this presentation to this board for a long time, just to see where we are on this. So I prepared a 3-page memo that just describes, and I'll just go through it briefly. Point number 1, the Department of Health has made at least 2 sanitary surveys of the county, and especially in Madison Heights, and they pointed out that the aging drain fields in Madison Heights are one of the biggest public health and environmental concerns in the county. Point number two, I've been asked by this board on several occasions to try to expedite sanitary sewer extensions into these areas, to have sewers there when these drain fields go bad. Point number three, there's a chart in there, it shows the joint funding by the Service Authority and the county to date for the last 5 years, including nothing really put away for each of us last year because of the COVID issues. Number four is just a quick description of what I was planning on doing last year was getting the Lakeview Phase 1 done, at least that project, and maybe phases 2 and 3, which would have been an expenditure of anywhere from $1/2 to $750,000. But because of COVID and because of still waiting for the Department of Health grant application for stimulus money for that all got tabled. I'm still hoping to get that done this year. On the next table, the next page, there's a table of all the different projects that are in planning right now. And what I did is I listed them all along with my just kind of a wag of what I think the cost would be, and if we were to do those projects right now, and they come out to just under $5 million. And I also went through and projected the Service Authority and county annual funding together, the joint funding, increasing them by inflation over 2.3% is what we've been using every year. And if that were to continue unabated for the next 10 years or so, we would have a little bit over $5 million. So we would be able to do all these projects. If we lose that funding, it's not going to happen. And where all this came from is 6-7 years ago, Mr. French went to the board after talking to, there was some kind of study done by the health department, and Hurt Profit, and the Service Authority. And they went through and looked at all the different areas that needed to have this done. And they figured it was going to take 70 years to get this done, to get all the areas sewered that needed to be sewered in Madison Heights. And by then, the drain fields are long since going to have failed. I mean, a drain field typically lasts 30 to 40 years tops. So the decision was made by the board at that time, we have to find a way to expedite this. And so this board got together with the supervisors, and there was a joint agreement to jointly fund this that would get this, be able to accomplish this in anywhere from 30 to 35 years. So that's where this is coming from. That's why we've been doing this for 5 years, or for the last 5 years. And I just wanted you all to be aware of this, as to, especially the two new board members, and maybe Mr. Martin, because you're still relatively new, and I hadn't reported on this in the past. So I just wanted to let you know what this, I've talked about it in the past. I want to make sure everybody knew what this was all about.
Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And here he goes again. So, I'm not going to weigh into this too much, because this is really a decision for the supervisors of Amherst County if they consider this to be a priority funding or not. And I think that's a good decision or just a good discussion for the supervisors to have. I do see from the authority's perspective that this seems certainly to be a worthwhile venture. However, when I'm looking at the list of projects that you're doing, totaling $5 million, the amount of time it's going to take you to get there, doing $300,000 at a pop, it makes me wonder why we don't see if we could, the authority can have an agreement with the county for long-term funding, and then wrap this thing up in a loan package and build it all at once. And I think that could be an option that you may want to consider. How do you get this built all at once? There's part of the option you can look at, what's the estimate of people that will connect to it now and start generating revenue sooner rather than later. And then take a look and see if it makes financial sense to try to knock it out all at once, or just spread it out over the next 12, 15 years.
Okay, well, understand, this is a program that I inherited when I got here. It already existed. And keep in mind where we are with our debt service right now. It's trying to borrow another $5 million when we're going to be borrowing 10 to 15 in just the next few years.
Is the issue our capacity to borrow or our capacity to repay?
Could be both. I don't know. I mean, right now, our budget is I don't want to say tapped out, but our budget is based on the revenues we expect to get every year. And if we're talking about having to repay an another $5 million over in a relatively short period of time. I mean, I don't know how long it would take.
This would have to be based on an understanding with Amherst County about funding this as if the county supervisor believe this to be a priority, then there'd have to be kind of a working agreement with the county to fund this every several years.
And that would be fine.
And that would
I'm
be
all for
part
it.
of the funding.
Sure.
But I think it'd be worthwhile looking at it as an option to see what kind of revenues you think we could develop.
Okay, so how would you, can you give me an idea of how I should proceed with what you just suggested?
When was the last time you did an extension, a sewer line extension like this?
We're about to do one we're about to start one on Westdale Court shortly, and I'll be talking about that. Well, I already talked about that shortly.
Right.
That's the developer agreement that I was
All
talking
right,
about.
so maybe one that you just recently finished, how many of those houses actually connected to it?
When we finish it, there'll be immediate, have to be, I think it's 16.
Okay, so on a percentage basis for the number of houses there, I'm thinking maybe that's your ballpark number, right? Is it a mandatory connection?
Yes, sir.
Oh, well, that's everybody.
That's a little different,
That's
right?
Yeah, that's
The
different.
Westdale's the apartments.
Yeah, they
Okay,
can.
yeah, you can't, yes, I agree with you.
That's
No,
not
no,
us.
it's just me knowing.
But I had the same question, Mr. Farrow, and that was, let's take Westdale off the table, where there's been failing drain fields, where have we done these sewer line extensions in the past, and what was the connection ratio?
You have to look at Lakeview subdivision.
Well, Lakeview was gonna be, and Lakeview was gonna be the big one. When we did phase one, that was gonna have the ability to connect about 40 homes. When we did phases 2 and 3, that was gonna add about another 40. But again, this is not a situation where I don't think we have any, that the service authority or the supervisors have any leverage to go in and require people to connect once the sewers are there. If we put the sewers there, so when the drain fields fail, the people have the option. You want to repair your drain field, you want to put in a new drain field, or you want to connect public sewer. That's been the way the program's put together.
Yeah, I mean, and I understand that, yet that's a pretty expensive, that's expensive infrastructure to put in just to give people an option.
Yes, sir.
And then they choose not to, we've got infrastructure on the ground that's not repaying us at all. So,
The question is, and it's not for an answer today, it's just what's the average percentage of people that connect? In the event that we borrowed $5 million, what kind of debt service could we generate as a result of connections? Based on past projects, if 20% of the people connect, or 50% of people connect, what's our average revenue from that household? How might it service that debt?
what's the return on investment?
Well, the other thing is, you gotta take into consideration the value of the homes you're putting them in. What is the income that these people have? Do they have the ability to tap onto that thing, to that sewer line immediately if they've got a working septic system? So, and then the other question about the county taking on that additional debt, I mean, there's a whole lot of people that in the county that pay taxes that do not have water or sewer. So then, we give them a little bit of a gift, $176,000 a year, or whatever it happens to be. I don't know, I think if we were gonna do that, to require everyone to tap on, then y'all better be prepared to catch a lot of heat, I can tell you that.
Like I said, I don't think the idea has ever been to require people, is to enable them to have the option. I've already heard, I mean, I've been here 5 years, and I've heard of so far of 3 different times the Department of Health has gotten in touch with me and told me they had to condemn a house because the people living there, the drain field had gone bad, they didn't have the money to replace it or repair it, and there was no sewer there. And that's something that I think we ought to be looking at is, taking care of the county citizens to make sure that happens. But you're right, that's a decision of this board and the supervisor.
Mr. Chairman, I'm in no way advocating for a mandatory connection for a new sewer line, because you're exactly right. Somebody's got a perfectly healthy septic system. There's no way they want to connect to it, and you shouldn't force it. But if it fails, then the option's there. And maybe you get 10% when you first build the line, but then maybe you get 5% a year for the next several years. But at some point, that revenue's going to build up.
Yes.
Okay, but the county is committed to to paying a little bit every year for this, and maybe that could be, I've seen where you can get some savings for doing an aggregate project, but it's gonna have to be a partnership with the county, and it's gotta make financial sense. And then I think there are also some interesting opportunities, such as rural development. This seems to be a perfect project for rural development.
Well,
And that's a good fund, it's a good financing source.
It is, but at the same time, you gotta remember that rural development is a very competitive grant. And also, they rely very heavily on what your median household income is. And ours is relatively high compared to others. It is compared to other people who apply for these grants. Now, that's the information I'm getting from the Central Virginia Planning District Commission.
I talked to Roland. I'm sorry, I'm getting into your business, and that's not my intent. I would suggest that you take a look at it and talk to them directly. I've had a lot of success.
One of the easy things we can do without spending any money is survey maybe the residents of certain neighborhoods and getting a feel for how many people are willing to connect. You know, then that way you have X amount of people willing to connect, you know, what you're going to get out of it, so.
have a buy-in before you.
Yeah.
Well,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
And I'll just say a couple of things. One, I don't think that we're implying that if we put a sewer line in and you have a healthy drain field, we come in and require you to connect. I do think if you're doing new construction and there's sewer lines in areas, you should be required. But as far as the, you know, going back to the board, the county as a whole, you know, everyone needs to realize that the county has a lot of other obligations other than just sewer lines, right? And my understanding is the board did not choose to cut the full 171,000. They did cut, their proposal to reduce it by about 11,000, and that might change based on our meeting today. But, you know, the board of supervisors are doing a lot of other things that we have to make.
Absolutely, and I will agree with that 100%. The other thing, a lot of these neighborhoods, there are neighborhoods here with the additional space built in to put a septic system. It's called 100% reserve or 50% reserve. Some of the places they can do this. Other places like Lakeview subdivision, they don't have the reserve in some of these. There was no planning or zoning at the time when they were developed, so you have no other option. Once they go out, we do have to have sewer there available for them. That's why these projects are the priority. And, but I agree with Mr. Martin. You know, the county's got a lot of other priorities, and we're having trouble filling all of those now. So take on a $5 million worth of debt, or however much it may be, it's going to be a struggle. So, but thank you, Mr. Hopkins.
Yep.
All right, I guess we can move on to that unless there's any other questions.
Okay, the next few are just real quick reports. 3 years ago, I was tasked by this board to go out and try to find quote unquote new and unconventional funding sources for the work that we're going to do. I've never reported back to this board, so and especially since we've got 2 new members, I thought it'd be worthwhile doing that. But you've got the report in front of you, and in the last 3 years, I've found about 7 projects that as written, they total almost $2 million in revenue that the Sewer Authority stands to benefit from, most of which we have already gotten. On the first page, the 2019 DEQ grants money, that is going to be part of the replacing the wastewater treatment plants with pump stations, which probably is still going to be several years down the road. But almost everything else on this list, we've already got in-house, including it's looking like, as I reported a little bit ago, it's looking like the state funding assistance for the Colony Road water line extension is actually going to go through and be increased from $100,000 to $250,000. So we're actually looking at over almost about $2.1 million that we have found in the last 3 years that you know, if the board hadn't tasked me to go looking for it, we never would have found it. So thank you very much for that. Questions?
I have no questions.
Okay, these will be quick reports, if you, look at them, and if you have questions next month, just bring them back. Next one is, delegation of duties. There was, again, because of 2 new board members and, this has not been talked about before, I thought I'd go through and just give you an idea of the, the work that I am delegating to various, agencies or staff. If you look at the first page, everything regarding the service authority staff and most of the contract consultants and those kind of things, that's never changed. The one that did change is certain profit. You can see the list there of the things that the previous director always delegated to hurt profit and paid for, that I'm now doing in-house. And my estimate is that I'm saving approximately $20,000 in revenue for the service authority every year. And my estimate for last year was almost $24,000. And then at the bottom of that page, you can see the things that have been delegated, or some of the things, most of the things have been delegated to the assistant director since he joined less than 6 months ago. So he's getting a fairly full plate. And if you look at the next page, you can see all the things that he's going to be getting involved in the next year. So just want to let you know all the stuff that is stuff that's being delegated to other people, since it's come up in past discussions. Any questions?
Seeing none, Mr. Hopkins, you can carry on, my friend.
Similarly, another topic of discussion in recent meetings has been the service authority planning by the executive director. And I just went through and just started making a list of everything that I've done in the last 5 years that had to do with planning for the service authority's future. And I thought it was something that you all might want to peruse through and just see if there's anything that you have any questions on or any additions that we should make to this list, and give you some direction as to where you think I should go. And again, we can talk about this more in future meetings as you have time to look through it.
All right, yeah, it's a lot of information there, Mr. Hopkins. So at this point in time, unless someone has some questions, we'll bring them back to you at a later date.
That'd be great. Next item is Service Authority cybersecurity. Oh, was there a question? I'm sorry. For those of you who are not aware, just a few weeks ago, there was a hack into a water treatment plant down in Florida that about the same size as ours, but it serves about 15,000 people. And the hacker got into the plant through their SCADA system. And he actually, he wasn't the brightest guy in the world. He actually did it during the day while the operator was working and could see what he was doing. But he started adding massive amounts of lye to the treatment process, which is, it's essentially poison if you put in too much. But he was caught. But I just wanted to bring this to your all's attention as to, we've been working on cybersecurity at the Service Authority for a long time. We shouldn't have any issue at the water plant itself. We do have issues at the water office, and I just, a couple weekends ago, I went in and met with our computer consultant, and we spent about 5 hours doing an assessment of our firewall, our equipment, and things we need to do to improve our cybersecurity. So we are working on that. Mr. Hall is working on that as part of our risk and resiliency assessment. It's going to be submitted to EPA in June. So I just want to let you know that we are working on this. This is not something that if you read about the Florida thing and wonder if we were at risk, we are, but we are working on it.
All right, and cybersecurity is going to be an ongoing problem. Even people who deal with that on a daily basis get hacked quite often. I don't know if you've ever had any experience with your credit card or anything like that, but I certainly have.
I actually had my identity stolen through when I turned in a driver's license a few years ago. And I had Maryland, Delaware, and Louisiana they all had bench warrants out for my arrest because somebody had gotten my license and modified it. And the guy, actually, the story I heard was that he went through I don't remember why they were chasing him, but he did a high speed chase through downtown Baltimore. ran about a dozen stoplights, almost ran down 3 people, and then rear-ended a truck. But he took off, and they never caught him, but they thought it was me. I don't know how they got it. I don't know how they got his driver's license. But
Wow.
it's not a pleasant experience.
No.
Well, I would think that that's where our primary risk is in the office, is identity theft. So it may be worthwhile as you're going through that assessment, take a look at the record that you do keep of our customers, and see what you don't need. It used to be we kept I said we, organizations kept social security numbers like it was a phone number. And if that's the information you don't need, maybe we can start purging the records of those identifying numbers if you don't need them.
We'll go back into that. Thank you. The next item is just something that I think you all need to be aware of, and this is House Joint Resolution 538 that got approved by the, I don't know if it's been through the full General Assembly yet, but what it essentially says, the original one talked about water is not just a public good, it's an actual public right. You have a right to water. And some of the things they talked about in this thing is that utilities do not have the right to cut off people for not paying their bills. People who have had their water services cut off and for not paying the bills and go back out and cut them back on their own, that should all be decriminalized. And you've got the resolution in front of you. It's, I mean, when I saw it, I got very, very concerned and contacted the legal counsels for the Virginia Association for Municipal Wastewater Agencies and the Virginia Water and Wastewater Authority Association, and talked quite a few times with Preston Bryant, who used to be a member of the General Assembly, and he told me he had already talked to the author of this resolution and talked her into modifying it. And she did go back and soften it a little bit to make it more aspirational. But when it was first passed, she talked about that being the springboard or the foundation for future concrete legislation to implement the things that are in the resolution. So this kind of stuff is incredibly scary when it comes to not only utilities and service authorities, but also lending institutions and other agencies. So I just wanted you all to be aware that this is out there.
Wow. Well, water is life, right? That's the saying.
It is, but it's funny because about a year ago, some lady called me and she was fuming about her bill. And she said, we talked about it for a bit. She just got angrier and angrier. And finally she came back and said, this is God's water. This is God's water. You can't, you don't have the right to make me pay for this. And I said, ma'am, this is not God's water. God's water is out in James River. If you want to use that water, you can, but what you're paying for is the water that we spend money to purify and deliver to you. That's what you're paying for. You're not paying for the water. You're paying for the chemicals and the equipment and the staff and everything else to get the water to you in a safe, reliable way, to use Ms. Moore's mission statement language. And I said that to her, and she just hung up the phone. She had nothing else to say.
So Mr. Hopkins, at this point, this has not been passed?
It's been passed, and then it passed on about mid-February, late February, and then she came back in and she's proposing some amendments to it to make it more quote-unquote aspirational. And what I've heard, there were a couple things that in the resolution that says utilities shall do this or people shall do that, and she's softening it to make it should be or should try to or something like that.
So it's just a resolution, though. It's not binding
At this time.
in this time.
So just something to keep in the back of your mind, something we may be fighting or having to deal with later on.
Well, but get back to the point of, that brings up, and maybe I missed it last month, but there was a moratorium on shipping people's water off. Is that still in place?
Yes, sir. At least until the end of, last I heard, at the end of this budget year, which will be June 30th, and the governor will make a decision at that time whether or not it will be extended. That's the last I've heard.
So how do you make up for the lost funds if you had you just got to eat it? Or is the state going to refund you?
Well, they did last year. They helped us with revenue last year through that program at the end of the year. They may do that again, I'm hoping they will, and I think I reported, either last meeting or the meeting before, that I had heard that the current, federal stimulus package actually has money in there to help utilities recover these kinds of things. I don't know whether it's actually in there, but that's what I've heard.
All right. Any more questions? All right, we'll move on to miscellaneous Hcsa matters.
This is gonna be a real quick one. I just, we talked last month about the, my performance evaluation for last year, and I've got packages for Hcsa, which is, and it's just, give me the top of that, Richard. So this is just all the stuff that, especially because we've got 2 new board members, I just want to make sure that, you know, if people are going to be evaluating me based on, I'm sorry, here, take another. They haven't come on in November, they really ought to have an idea of different things that are going on during the year. So, and with that, that's all I got.
Mr. Hopkins, when is it? Oh, this is due, next month, no, May, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
We have a little bit of time before. And you've attached the actual evaluation form in
Yeah,
here.
it should be the very first document after the letter.
All right.
You also have the last the last document in the first package is actually last year's evaluation, so you got something to look at from last year.
Mr. Chairman, may I make a recommendation that we put a closed session on for April to discuss it between us? And then in May, I guess, for us to present it to Mr. Hopkins?
That would be fine with me. There's a motion on the, unless there's any more discussion. There's a motion on the floor by Mrs. Moore. Everybody, excuse me. Motion on the floor by Ms. Moore. Everybody signify by saying aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Motion carries. Is that all you got for us, Mr. Hopkins?
Isn't that enough?
Yeah, that's a lot.
Yes, that's all I got.
You-
I can come up with more if you want some, Mr. Keegan.
No, we've got enough. I don't know if I can read all this. I might go crazy. But
If you can't sleep, pull it out. That's all right.
well, I certainly do appreciate it. You're definitely detail oriented, and I appreciate that.
Thank you, sir.
All right, board, I guess we've come full circle. We're back to citizen comments. I don't see anybody in the audience, so we'll go ahead and go to matters from members of the Service Authority Board. Mr. Wood?
Nothing.
Mr. Barrett? Ms. Moore?
Yeah, I just have a question. Were you able to connect with Ms. Woodman about her hot water heater? She sent an email.
Oh, yes, ma'am. There's 2 I'm thinking of. Yeah, the issue wasn't our, when I talked to her, she actually went back and talked to her plumber, and they realized that her hot water heater was, it is a lot older than they thought it was, and it was just the it was the PRV on the hot water heater that went bad.
That's all.
Mr. Martin? I have nothing either, so we'll go ahead and entertain an adjournment if anyone would like to make that motion.
Motion to adjourn.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All right.
Thank you all.